So they dubbed the first IndyCar race at Circuit of the Americas the IndyCar Classic, and at the time they named the race that, it seemed a wee bit presumptuous. However, it was nice to see the Grand Prix moniker dropped for brand new IndyCar races, particularly on road courses. But looking back on it, hindsight being 2020, they made a pretty good decision naming this the IndyCar Classic, because this may be a race that we look back on in 10, 5, 20 years, whatever measurement of time you want to go back or forward in this case. We may be looking back on this race and really looking at it as a classic race. And the reason being is that I think we saw a true changing of the guard in IndyCar racing. We saw the young cream of the crop drivers from the road to Indy and elsewhere in the European ladder system really rise to the top, as a lot of the older names are either flittering to the wind or are, pretty clearly in the twilight of their career. In fact, at one point during this race, 5 out of the top 10 drivers were rookies to the series. So, let's talk about this race, because in reality, thinking about it and thinking about the races that I have seen at COTA, I haven't seen a lot of the bike stuff, so I could be wrong when I say this, but I think this may have been the most competitive, exciting race that Circuit of the Americas has seen, at least certainly on the four-wheeled side. I don't think any of the GT races and certainly none of the Formula One races quite matched this in terms of unpredictability, excitement, and some pretty ballsy passes. I finally said it. I was going to say bold, I was going to say ballsy, so I said ballsy. Ballsy passes. And that certainly describes one driver we're going to talk about a little bit later. So the start of the race. Will Power out front, kind of like St. Pete, got a big-time jump. Apparently, he's not just a great qualifier, he's a great starter. But the guy who I was really looking at on this start was Colton Herta, and he made a ballsy move in the middle of Ryan Hunter-Reay and Scott Dixon to take over the third spot. Alexander Rossi was in third, and it looked like Will Power would be dominant, but Rossi would get a shot on lap 3, couldn't quite make the pass, and then everything kind of fell into, as Marty Reed used to say, lockstep. It seemed like passing was at a premium. In fact, in a lot of ways, I thought it looked a lot like this race. It looked a lot like the race it replaced at Phoenix, where everybody was running in a line, not really able to pass very much, not being able to get up close to make a move. That changed, however, once we started seeing pit stops, and I have to say the strategy elements of this race really helped it significantly in terms of the excitement level. The strategy itself, we saw cars that pitted early a lot of times had the advantage over the cars that pitted late. What was interesting about that was the guys up front, like the Will Powers, the Alexander Rossis, and to a lesser extent the Colton Hertas, who were really pulling away, and actually those three drivers had a huge gap throughout most of this race. They pitted the latest, and you saw guys who pitted earlier, like Marcus Ericsson, able to make up huge amounts of ground under the green flag by just going to fresh tires and being able to set quick lap times in clean air. And then once everybody else cycled through and traffic became a factor, you saw those gaps significantly, or the amount of time they could make up significantly shrink. So clean air was definitely a major factor in this race. If you could get it, you could get out front with some fresh tires as well, you were pretty much golden. And that's where we started seeing some of the significant passes up at the front. Coming out of the pits, Alexander Rossi put on some fresh tires, but Colton Herta had a lap of heat built up in his tires, and he made the pass on the inside of Alexander Rossi. And he's not the only guy. Now, definitely Colton Herta, we're going to talk about him a lot in this video. But I want to talk about somebody who's going to be buried a little bit by the performance of Mr. Herta, and that is his former teammate, actually his former Harding Steinbrenner Racing teammate, Pato O'Ward, Patricio O'Ward, the young Mexican driver who really got screwed over, no doubt in my mind, really screwed over in the off-season. Looked like he was going to be Colton Herta's teammate. That didn't happen. So he missed St. Petersburg to run a pretty much full schedule with Carlin Racing. And once we see this move I'm about to show you, we got to start crowdfunding for Pato to run the rest of the season. The races that he's not showing up in, he needs to be in, because I've said it before about Pato. I think he's a generational talent. He feels, to me, a lot like a Michael Andretti or an Alex Zanardi, a guy who absolutely gives everything and just seems to have the talent over other drivers to be able to make some incredible moves, like the battle he had with Graham Rahal, inside, outside, and then going around the Istanbul turn, I guess you could say, of Circuit of the Americas, driving around the outside and making the pass on Graham Rahal. I mean, Graham Rahal is a veteran of this series at this point, a race winner, and Pato O'Ward made him look like a rookie. Just being able to it was unbelievable. I mean, I really think Pato O'Ward is the real deal. And again, he's another one of those drivers that is looking like he's going to be a long-term star of the future. And you think about him finishing 6th in a Carlin car, and you think about the performance of Carlin Racing as of recent, and you even look at the performance of his teammate. Now, there may have been a problem there mechanically, but Max Chilton ended up finishing somewhere like almost last. He was a lap down at one point. He got passed by Zach Veach, who spun off at the first corner and lost a lap because he broke a tie rod. So you look at how far in one race, and remember, Pato has had 0 testing. He was able to get that team up where they haven't been in quite some time. So big shout out to Pato O'Ward. Again, he's going to fly under the radar, unfortunately, because of the performance of another rookie in this race. But Pato O'Ward, man, he is the real deal. And oh yeah, some of these drivers who have been around a little while, they're still pretty good too. Alexander Rossi decided to show Colton Herta the track limits of Circuit of the Americas way on the inside, kicking up the dust, but was able to pull that move off. And now we get to the main portion of this race, or at least the real turning point. Track limits, like I was just talking about. They had been an issue all weekend, and Felix Rosenqvist and James Hinchcliffe got into each other. Rosenqvist hard into the inside wall at turn 19. Now, turn 19 was one of the corners where IndyCar had really given them a lot of leeway. They hadn't put any sausage curbs down at all. And in fact, throughout this weekend, IndyCar pretty much said, we're not enforcing track limits at all. Before this race, I thought that was a bad idea. I thought, as so much we hear about the track limits at these modern tracks, it's for safety. So I thought, well, why are they going to take risks, take chances to not enforce track limits if they're there for a reason? After the race, seeing what it did for the race, seeing the excitement value from especially them cutting the course at turn 19, I don't have as much of a problem with it as I did before. I think it definitely cut down on the officiating elements of this race. I was worried that was going to be a major problem. But that being said, I think a lot of my more Formula One viewers, my European viewers, are going to have a much different opinion of an incident like this with Rosenqvist and Hinchcliffe, because of the fact that you're in an area where generally, if you were racing in WEC or you're racing in Formula One, you wouldn't be out there anyway, and really it was an avoidable crash based on the circumstances that are the general track limits. Now, the one thing I guess I would say about the track limits, specifically in turn 19, I mean, if you're going to do that, I would like to see them move that wall further back. The one that Marcus Ericsson hit with the Porta-John behind it. Outside of that, I mean, this is the thing we always hear, and guys like Jackie Stewart have said this, so I'm not the only one that's saying this, but I think in a lot of ways, some of the track safety has gone so far in the overly safe side that it has almost created racing drivers that don't respect the racetracks as much as maybe they should, or at least the other competitors as much as they should. And a crash like Rosenqvist and Hinchcliffe, I guess that wouldn't have happened if it had been the Formula One race, because they both would have gotten a penalty anyway for running out there the first time they did it. I don't know. Again, that's something that I'm sure the comments section is going to have a huge debate about. But I think for the purposes of this weekend, it worked. Now, here's another controversial part about this yellow coming out when it did. It was towards the end of the race, and you had what looked like it was going to be a battle on fresh red tires between Will Power and Alexander Rossi. Herta had fallen off the back of the field quite a bit at this point, or at least the back of the two front runners at this point. But Herta pitted the lap before the caution came out. So it caught out not only Will Power, Alexander Rossi, but also Scott Dixon. You could arguably say that's your Mount Rushmore in terms of drivers at this point. They are the top dogs, and they went to the back because of those pit stops. Now guess what happened to Will Power after leading virtually the entire race, qualifying on the pole position. As he came out of the pits, he snapped the drive line, and his race was over. Now, Will Power had this to say about IndyCar closing the pits under the yellow.
Yeah, I hate the way this series does this pits closed BS. You can be the best guy out there, lead all day, and a yellow can fall, and someone can just fall into a lottery. It's the only series in the world that does it this way, and it needs to change.
And the reason I showed that clip is because I want to talk about this very briefly. I agree with Will Power on this one. I think that unless you have a situation, and ironically this was a situation where you would have had to close the pits because of the positioning of Felix Rosenqvist's car, unless the pit entry is blocked by safety equipment and or a crash that requires the safety team to roll and block that pit lane entrance, shouldn't have to close the pits. Ultimately, it results in artificial results where certain drivers will get advantages where other drivers who were able to drive better races are penalized by that. Basically, the close nature of IndyCar kind of shows that. And for those of you who will say, well, no, keep the rule the way it was because Colton Herta wouldn't have won if that would have been the case. Well, I'll put it to you another way. What would have happened if Colton Herta had dominated this entire race and Will Power would have been the beneficiary of a pit lane issue like that? I mean, how would you feel then? So it goes both ways. I think that, I think they should change it. I think the pit should be open all the time unless there is a safety reason why they shouldn't be. And also, while we're at it, can we get rid of the wave around rule? Because that really sucks. It's probably the worst rule in IndyCar racing. People shouldn't get their laps back for absolutely free and also be able to pit at the same time. It sucks. Anyway, so we have the situation where 18-year-old rookie Colton Herta, been fast, blistering fast in testing at Circuit of the Americas, looks like he's set to win the race. But he's got some hungry guys behind him. The winner of the race at St. Petersburg, Joseph Newgarden, as well as former Series and Indy 500 champion Ryan Hunter-Reay. And I have to say, I lost some faith in Herta, not because of him, but because we've been teased so many times before. Think of all the races with Robert Wickens last year, rookies up front, even just back to St. Pete with Rosenqvist. I thought that maybe Newgarden was going to punt Herta out of the way or something was going to happen to keep Colton Herta from going to the front. But it wasn't the case. Herta got an absolutely stellar restart. I mean, he should be a sprint car driver, to sound like Robin Miller a little bit here, because that was just a dynamite restart, pulled away from everybody else. And even though it looked like Herta was not going to be challenged at all, Alexander Rossi was charging through the field just like he always does. I mean, you have to say about Alexander Rossi, the guy is an absolute beast, especially when he's playing from behind. I just wanted to show some clips of him going nuts because it's amazing. But yeah, surprise, surprise. The youngest winner in IndyCar history at 18 years, 11 months, Colton Herta wins at Circuit of the Americas. And wow, what a moment. What a moment. There's a lot of hype around Colton Herta. And there has been a lot of hype around him. A lot of people talking about this new partnership with Harding Steinbrenner Racing, along with those Andretti Autosports parts on that car, the shocks and the dampers, even though that's the same thing. Shocks and dampers are the same thing. They're just different words for the same thing. But they have shown that given the right opportunity, they are right there. And in fact, he probably could have done this at St. Pete had he not made that mistake in qualifying with Charlie Kimball. I'm sure he won't want to hear that, but that is something. I mean, Colton Herta could be leading the championship right now, and who could have predicted that? And looking at the schedule going forward, a lot of people are maybe thinking that Colton will struggle on the ovals. I don't see why he would. He did win the Freedom 100 one year, and he, again, he's in an Andretti car. He's going to have so many teammates around him. It sounds like he's going to have his own personal teammate at Harding-Steinbrenner Racing. That may end up being Carlos Munoz. So if you think Carlos Munoz, that guy's pretty fast around Indianapolis. So I don't know. I mean, could Colton Herta? I mean, we're talking. Sometimes we talk about the Rookie of the Year battle. The Rookie of the Year battle could end up being the battle for the championship. I know Rosenquist didn't have a very good day today, but what happens if Rosenquist gets hot? We already know Colton Herta is capable of winning races. Marcus Ericsson looked very good today. Santino Ferrucci looked pretty good today at some times. So, and then you look at Pato O'Ward. Man, oh man. Now, I've been waxing positive about the Harding-Steinbrenner team because they did a fantastic job today. But boy, did they miss an opportunity. Boy, do I think they blew it not hiring Pato. Because imagine if Pato, with the performance he just put in a Carlin car, if you have Colton and Pato in similar equipment. Just saying, you could have a 1-2 in the championship right now if you're the Harding-Steinbrenner team. I'm sure they're thinking about that, but boy, what a missed opportunity. What a 1-2 punch that would have been. Colton Herta, man. Think about the year he's had already. He has won the Rolex 24. Fortunately, didn't have a very good Sebring 12 hours. I think that was a little bit more down to BOP than anything else. He came to St. Pete, was impressive early on. Again, the penalty kind of took him out of contention, but he still ran all day, had a great run there, all things considered. Then you get the Circuit of the Americas, his third IndyCar race in his career, and he takes a win before he even turns 19, beating Graham Rahal's record at St. Petersburg back 10, 11 years ago now. Amazing how quickly time flies. And it was also kind of cool that Graham was one of the first guys to congratulate him, almost, again, passing the torch. One driver who was the young prodigy at one point, and now Colton Herta seems to be the young prodigy. So, I mean, overall, in terms of a race, that's about as positive as I could get. Was there a ton of green flag lead changes? No. Did you need a ton of green flag lead changes in this race? I would say probably not. I think the racing quality was fine. The race played out naturally, as about as naturally as you could get. Maybe Will Power would contest a little bit about the yellow flag and the pit lane issue. But I thought it was an excellent race. And we've got a new star in IndyCar racing. There's not going to be many people who don't know who Colton Herta is now, if you didn't already know. And think about this. That car has blank side pods right now. If I were a potential sponsor, I'd be looking at that team. Or maybe Valvoline could step up. There's a pretty big Valvoline logo on that car. And I know Al Unser Jr. works with that team. Be pretty cool. Be pretty cool to do a 92 Galmer throwback. I'm just saying. That'd be pretty awesome. Anyway, what did you think of this race? What do you think of track limits? What do you think of a pretty freaking decent race at COTA? What do you think of Colton Herta? Is he the real deal? I think he is. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Subscribe for more IndyCar and motorsport content. We'll be seeing you in the next video.